Hello again. Now, it's been 2 years since the National Strategic Plan was put in place to fight gender-based violence, but the numbers show not much has changed. According to statistics from the police, the murder of women increased between the first quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022 by 52%. And the murder of children went up by 46%. Yesterday, President Matamela Ramaphosa said South Africans need to hold government accountable to make sure that the National Strategic Plan to fight GBV and femicide actually works. So how do we as citizens do that? Our reporter Nobesuthu Hejana has been up and about in Cape Town. She's joining us this hour, just finding out what human rights organizations, Nobesuthu, have been saying about the fight against GBV. Good afternoon. What are you finding out?
Well, Braden, they're not happy with the current stats. They are also alleging that the numbers could be more. But to hear more from these organizations, I'm joined by Nicole Merker from Fight Back SA. Nicole, I mean, you have been monitoring what is happening in Johannesburg, the summit. From what you're seeing, are you happy with what has been presented by the president?
So I think I'm joined by a lot of other civil society organizations when I say that we welcome the fact that gender-based violence remains on the national agenda. But unfortunately, a 13% increase in sexual offences, and that only being the reported number of sexual offences, is very worrying. Anyone in the sector that operates in the gender-based violence space will tell you that any of these stats are usually 3 times higher than what is actually reported to the South African Police Service. So what we're actually looking at today is perhaps close to a 40% increase in the number of sexual offences that have taken place in the last year.
Let's talk about the president calling it an accountability summit. I mean, it started back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And what have you seen in terms of like the change? Has it brought anything positive from what you're seeing as organizations who are always on the ground dealing with these matters?
So I wouldn't call it an accountability summit, and that being because if gender-based violence and fighting gender-based violence, if it was a business that investors had put 21 billion rand behind over the last 3 years, and your key performance indicators that have been released recently show that the murder rate for women has increased by 52% and the murder rate for children has increased by 46%, then we would say that that business has failed dismally. And I think that if the government and if the president wants to hold himself accountable, he shouldn't be sitting on a stage with 100 cameras pointed at him. He should spend the next 365 days visiting the families of the victims. He should tear himself away from state business every single day to go and speak to the families of the women who have been raped, the women that have been killed, the children and the babies that have been dismembered. Then I would call that an accountability summit.
Let's talk about the work that you do. We do understand you have a center in Lavender Hill, but you're working in many communities around Cape Town. So how bad is the situation? I mean, we can hear from what the president is saying, presenting the stats, but from you, the people are actually on the ground. You have the real stats. You have the real cases of what is happening in these communities. So just paint us a picture of how bad the situation is.
So it is looking quite dismal, and I think that there are 3 very big factors here that have contributed to things getting worse over the last 3 years. Obviously, the COVID-19 lockdown had a severe impact on the number of gender-based violence cases that we saw coming in. The fact that load shedding keeps the lights out during early morning hours and late evening hours when women are walking to work by themselves, that causes a lot of opportunity for predators to strike. And then the third thing that is quite a huge issue is our unemployment statistics. People are desperate, people are hungry, and that only incentivizes people that are already predators in their nature to obviously want to prey even further. And, you know, women and children, they are the most vulnerable members of our communities. But Fight Back South Africa, what we do specifically is we provide free self-defense classes and free pepper sprays to women and children that live in communities that are particularly besieged by gangsterism and substance abuse, where perhaps police visibility is very low. So we've been doing that for the last 4 years as a means to provide women and children with the skills they need to change an outcome of a violent situation. And that is proving to be very effective. We have women telling us daily that they're using the skills that we we offer them to fight back against attackers, to prevent an attack from becoming an abduction, to prevent an attack from becoming a rape. And certainly we've seen some headway in that regard. But in terms of the 21 billion rand that was allocated to address gender-based violence, I haven't heard of a single civil society organization that is doing this work on the ground. Not just Fight Back South Africa, but Felisa Bafazi Betu and the great people of South Africa. There's a lot of different organizations that have just not seen the funds. So it would be useful to know where the money went, and I would be very interested to know in how much this gender-based violence summit actually cost.
Lastly, in an ideal word, Nicole, what would you like to see happen?
I would absolutely love to see government trust its people. There is no shortage of organizations that are doing an incredible job to fight gender-based violence in this country. Government simply needs to afford them with the skills and the funding that they need to better increase and capacitate their operations. And then we'll definitely begin to see a change.